Hello and welcome back to another episode of Your Pennsylvania Dutch Minute. I am coming to you with another book recommendation this time. I've done this in the past with books that I thought were of interest to anybody that's interested in Pennsylvania Dutch things or all things Pennsylvania Dutch. Sometimes they have been language learning books. Sometimes they have been books dealing with history or culture. Like I've books on powwowing, for example, or I did a video on a book about the Pennsylvania Dutch during the Civil War. But I don't think I've ever come to you with a book recommendation about a work of fiction. We're changing that today. I am here to tell you about not just one book, but a series of books that deals with a very interesting Pennsylvania Dutch topic that nobody ever really talks about. Let me pull in our presentation here real quick, and that is the Gideon Stoltz Historical Mysteries. There's a series of 3 books. I heard there's a 4th one coming eventually, known as the Gideon Stoltz Mysteries by author, and I'll show you his picture real quick, Charles Fergus. Now, Charles was born and raised in north central Pennsylvania, actually right here in Center County where I live now, but since has moved to the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, but he still has strong ties to his Pennsylvania roots. And he has been an author of multiple publications over the years. Early on in his career, he wrote for the Pennsylvania Game News, did a lot of scientific writing. But here recently, over the last couple of years, he has switched to fiction. And he came out with a series of novels, all dealing with the main character, Gideon Stoltz. And I want to share and talk about these books with you guys today. And hopefully some of you might be interested in picking up, a copy of one or two. And I'll just start with this taken from Charles's website. And I have a link down below for his website, so you can check out information about him and about the books more in depth than what I'm about to say. But as Paul Dorian, or Doiron, sorry if I mispronounced his name, says, and this is the top of Charles's website, these mysteries are strong, well-drawn characters, rich attention to natural detail, and a haunting narrative makes this a series to get excited about. The main character in Charles's novels is Gideon Stoltz. Now, yes, that sounds like a Pennsylvania Dutch name. Well, it is. The character Gideon is a sheriff who originally was born and raised in Lancaster County, and all of the novels are set in Jacksonian era America. So 1830s. Think about that time period. It's a period of history that a lot of Americans don't really know all that much about. I don't think we teach it enough in history classes. We get the revolution in the 1770s and into the 1780s, the creation of the Constitution, and then everyone's like, "Yay, America's been created!" And then the next thing everybody knows about is the Civil War. Well, what about that 50 years in between? 1800 to 1850, this era of when America was truly, were we going to make it or not? A lot of internal struggle, the whole slavery issue aside, just these cultures coming together and clashing and trying to work together to create a new country, and not just create it, but also maintain it. That's the America that these novels are set in, an era that is really interesting. And what Charles does really well is this main character, Gideon, in the novels. Gideon also was I think I mentioned, born in Lancaster County. He eventually makes his way to central Pennsylvania at a time when central Pennsylvania was a pretty rough place. In the fictional town of Adamant, in the fictional county of Coleraine County, Gideon finds himself becoming the sheriff of this new county, or not new county, but of this county where, things are a little rough around the edges yet. America hasn't refined itself, and he is a Pennsylvania Dutchman in not Pennsylvania Dutch country. And what Charles really does well from the Pennsylvania Dutch perspective, I think, again, this is something we don't talk much about, is how did our forefathers and foremothers that left Pennsylvania Dutch country, that went out to central Pennsylvania or western Pennsylvania throughout the 1800s, what happened when they ran into non-Pennsylvania Dutch people? Scotch Irish, for example, were they welcoming of these outside Pennsylvania Dutch people? Weren't they? Those topics are also explored in these novels, and that's what, from a Pennsylvania Dutch perspective, I love it. And also what Charles does really well, and this I'm just going to say because, full disclosure, I have been a point of contact for Charles in this writing process for Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. He peppers his books with Pennsylvania Dutch words, because we get inside the mind of Gideon, who is a Pennsylvania Dutchman. And I've been very blessed to be able to work with Charles, and he'll say, hey, what do you think Gideon would say in Pennsylvania Dutch for this kind of situation? And luckily Charles agrees with or takes my advice and uses them in the books. But as of right now, there are 3 novels out, and I wanted to just give you a quick overview of the 3 novels, so maybe you could think about, this is what I watch. There is Charles, great guy, super nice guy. And he also puts this disclaimer on his website too, to kind of think about ourselves. All 3 of these are mysteries, where Gideon, as the sheriff of Coleraine County, in all of the books, he has to solve a crime, hence the mystery. And you think about, how did people solve crime in a very rough and ready early America? And I would just like to read this bit from Charles's website to you guys. The Gideon Stoltz Mysteries are set during the age of Andrew Jackson, a time when the foundations of the modern United States were being laid. It is a tumultuous era with many echoes of our current day. Controversy raged over foreign immigration, prison reform, free education, religion, gun violence, a growing inequality of wealth. Who should have the right to vote? States' rights versus federal oversight, and that overreaching and hugely incendiary issue, slavery. Law enforcement was spotty and difficult. An 1830s sheriff like Gideon Stoltz has no access to telephones or computers, fingerprinting, DNA testing, or rapid travel over long distances. A sheriff patrolled his jurisdiction on horseback or by Shank's mare on foot. He had to use brains and instincts, and sometimes brawn, to solve crimes and thwart criminals. And you can learn more about Gideon Stoltz's America if you go to Charles's website. There's a lot of historical data there too that you can click and read through. So you got to think about this. How did a sheriff in 1830s America solve crimes? Well, that's what I think Charles does so well in his books, because he puts us in the 1830s and in the mind of the sheriff that has, you can't just get in the patrol car and drive 2 miles down the road in a couple minutes. You got to get on that horse and you got to ride 2 miles. And that's not a 2-minute journey. I just talk real quickly, like a brief overview of the 3 books that are out. So the first one that came out, A Stranger Here Below. Here's the overview of the book to kind of wet your whistle. 1835, Adamant, Coleraine County, Pennsylvania. The young sheriff Gideon Stoltz faces his first real challenge when his mentor, a respected local judge, ends his own life. Gideon is regarded with suspicion. He's new to town and Pennsylvania Dutch in the backcountry Scotch-Irish settlement, and he found the judge's body. Gideon's own mother was a victim of a violent crime, and he must confront his own earlier trauma as he digs into the judge's past. When he realizes that his friend's suicide was spurred by much more than despair, Gideon must follow a dangerous path into Adamant's troubled history. So that first book really gives us an insight into who Gideon is and this community that he is now living in, and not only living in, but he's the figure of authority. It is the first book is what sucked me in. When Charles reached out to me while writing these, he laid this foundation for me. And I was like, this sounds really interesting and exciting. And then when the first book finally came out, I could not put this book down. I flew through it. And when the second one came out, Nighthawk's Wing, let me tell you about that. So we have the same character, Gideon Stoltz. In the rough and tumble backwoods town of Adamant, the young Pennsylvania Dutch sheriff Gideon Stoltz has a new case when a woman suspected of witchcraft is found murdered. Suffering from a head injury after a fall off his horse, Gideon can't recall anything that happened at the time of the woman's death. As flashes of memory return, he realizes that not only did he know the victim, he was with her the night before she died. Nighthawk's Wing beckons readers to crave authenticity in early American historical novels, including those intrigued by the Amish and Mennonite communities, witchcraft, spells, and visions. This compelling mystery glides along the edge between the gritty reality of the early 1800s and a parallel world of spirits and haunted souls. What I really loved about the Nighthawk's Wing is that, and not Gideon, Charles does his research, and that's what makes these books so good to me. He does the research necessary to truly bring 1830s Pennsylvania to life. One of the aspects of Nighthawk's Wing that I, as a Pennsylvania Dutch person, truly enjoyed was that a lot of the book goes into the use of plants and herbs for medicinal purposes. And we know that the Pennsylvania Dutch had that tradition. It touches maybe a little bit on the fringes of powwowing to a certain extent, but it wasn't just that Charles will say, oh, well, so and so used this plant to make tea. No, he tells you the plan. He has done the research. That's what I love about his book so much. So that was the second book that came out a couple years ago, Nighthawk's Wing. Again, I couldn't put that book down. It was cover to cover for me. And just recently, and the reason I'm putting this series out now is because the third book in the series has just come out this late winter, early spring 2023, Lay This Body Down. And let me tell you a little bit about that book that just came out. 1837. So we've moved ahead in time a little bit, right? Human beings were considered chattel, and both northern and southern states grew rich from slave labor. Pennsylvania sheriff like Gideon Stoltz could uphold the federal Fugitive Slave Act or defy that racist law at great peril. In this hard-hitting, action-packed novel, Gideon tries to help a boy who has fled north from Virginia and pays dearly for his principles. Written with the vivid, atmospheric prose that imbues the whole series, the life and times of an early American town and its hardscrabble citizens will grip readers as Gideon and his wife, True, work to solve a murder, thwart a kidnapping ring, and help one unforgettable boy who chooses freedom above all else. I just finished this book, and again, Charles takes an aspect of our history from this era, 1830s, runaway slaves, thinking like early Underground Railroad. And even though Pennsylvania was a northern state and slavery had been outlawed, there was not everybody necessarily agreed with that law in central Pennsylvania and other parts of Pennsylvania too. There were two sides. There were the people that were completely abolitionist, anti-slavery, but then there were also people in Pennsylvania that knew they could make some money off of this. Maybe they didn't agree with abolition. Maybe they felt that Negroes, African Americans were less of a people than what whites were. All of these ideas and topics are discussed in this book, and man, when I read action packed, this one truly is action packed. Again, Charles is writing what Charles can do. Okay, so great research, truly sets the scene, sets the era in language that anybody, whether you're a history buff or not, can truly sink their teeth into. I'm a history buff. I love this stuff, but I've talked to people that have read these novels that necessarily aren't history buffs, and they all say the same thing. It's the stories. The stories alone bring the reader in, but it's Charles's attention to detail, his attention to historical accuracy that makes these novels so delicious. I can't say it any better than that. And as someone that comes from Pennsylvania Dutch background, to have the main character, the hero, be Pennsylvania Dutch, well, that just makes me feel even better. So I would love to recommend, or I do, I love to recommend to you guys this series, the Gideon Stoltz Mysteries series by Charles Fergus. Since most of you watching this channel are interested in Pennsylvania Dutch things, I know that you would love this series. I normally don't read a lot of fiction anymore in my life. I read a lot of nonfiction, but here's an exception. When these books come out, as soon as I get the newest edition, I put down whatever else I'm reading and I rip into them. I love them. I can't sing Charles's praises enough. Please check out his website. I have the link in the show notes down below. You can get his books via Amazon, and I'll put a link to that. But on Charles's website, he provides information if you wanted to buy his books directly from a local mom and pop bookstore in Vermont where he lives, to support them instead of supporting big old Amazon and Jeff Bezos. Your choice. But I'll put the Amazon link and Charles's website's link, in the show notes down below. Please check these novels out. If you've read them and you enjoyed them, leave your comment down below. Or once you've read them, leave some comments down below and let me know what you thought, and I'll pass these comments on to Charles for sure. Him and I talk from time to time, and I'll gladly let him know what my viewers, you guys, have thought about his novels too. I guarantee you won't regret purchasing these books. If you have an idea for a future video, you got to let me know. Shoot me an email or drop me a line on any of our social media feeds, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Just, look up PA Dutch 101. If you're not following us along on social media, what are you doing? Get on that train. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, yay, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to that YouTube channel. Let me know how we're doing. Hopefully you like the material and the content that we're putting out. We're going to keep doing it as long as we can. If you'd like to support us financially, buy me a coffee. That link's in the show notes down below as well. And we're getting into summertime. Need a new t-shirt? Check out our Zazzle shop, where you can purchase Pennsylvania Dutch themed merchandise as well. That's enough for now, boys and girls. Go out and buy a copy of A Stranger Here Below, the first in the Gideon Stoltz series. You'll want to buy book 2 and book 3. Trust me. Till next time, dear friends, keep practicing your Pennsylvania Dutch, and Mock Scoot.
Mock Scoot!